When it comes to the Sly franchise, there's nothing I love more than its art. Its comic book nature is eye-catching and really pops out from the jump. There have been games that try to imitate the comic aesthetic, like Comix Zone on the Genesis or Jet Set Radio, but few really capture it perfectly. In this video, I'll be covering the art style of Sly Cooper. Whether you're a longtime fan or just getting into the series, you will want to watch all the way through as I deep dive into the series' history. And what better way to start than from the beginning? This is the art of Sly Cooper. Going through the original art designs of the beloved raccoon, we see he was planned to look totally different from his final depiction. Most of these iterations have a more rounder look to them compared to what we get in the end. While I am very thankful none of these ended up being his final design, it's still interesting to look back on what could have been. This design here seems to be one of the ones that they kinda liked, as it was just put into different scenes for the game. He's even seen side by side with the Panda King and his henchmen, character designs that made it into the final game. This iteration of Sly isn't far off from the final design in a sense. It seems though that it was just a placeholder to move the project along. As we get closer to the final design, here's what I can only presume is the second to final iteration for the raccoon. This version of Sly is nearly there with some interesting choices in design. It actually looks pretty cool and I dig the baggy sweater. The mechanical cane has a fascinating look to it. At first glance it looks out of place. However, early on they wanted Sly's cane to transform in order to complete some of the puzzles that were planned. This can even be seen in this footage as well as heard from the director's commentary in game.
That there was going to be invisible lasers all over this area and you were going to have to spray something into the ahead of you to expose the beams, either smoke or frost or something in front of you. Each time you did a jump, you had to kind of look around you for the invisible lasers and then make your next jump. And as we backed away from the puzzly, slower gameplay, that was the first idea that went away.
You can see how it would work as the cane has a button near his finger. The idea was obviously scrapped and the game was better for it. In most designs that we've seen, Sly always had a red satchel. While the bit on the nose for a comical thief, it was traded in for a red backpack. The final design took everything from the last concept pieces, with a few tweaks to give us what we have today, giving Sly a backpack made for cool animations and a place to put his stolen goods. Most characters don't have explanations on where coins or rings go when collected, so it's nice to see something a bit more realistic and different.
Wow, where does somebody put all those gold rings? You know what? I don't know. I keep forgetting to ask.
There aren't very many scans out there for the rest of the cast other than their final design. However, one character does have a few that I can show and she's arguably the second most important character in the franchise. Carmelita Fox, or known as Inspector Chase Montoya Fox, and this concept art. You could probably already see what they did there with her name. Having Chase be her first name makes sense game-wise, but the final change was an excellent choice. This design was also considered to be final as you can see playable footage of her with the final Sly iteration. I can only speculate that this might have been another placeholder as this design doesn't fit in compared to the rest of the cast. Here is a look at that model in game on this E3 preview disc.
I caught you red-handed!
Ah, Carmelita. I haven't seen you since I gave you the slip in Bombay.
That's Inspector Carmelita Fox. And by the way, you dirty thief, you need to return the Firestone of India to its rightful owners.
In this footage, she is mentioned as Carmelita, not Chase. It seems the name change was made early in development. I want to add that this version of Inspector Fox looks a lot older than Sly, so a change to make her look around his age would make sense, especially with the relationship they have in the game. Thankfully, someone in the dev team thought it wasn't a good depiction either, and so it was changed. Here's an expression sheet with the new design for the Inspector. The other faces look a bit off or out of character compared to the later games, but it's what she looks like in this game. Moving to the full of her final composition, Carmelita went from the ugliest illustration to one of my favorite concept art pieces in the whole series. Something about this art style is just so raw to me. It doesn't have that corporate look to it. That goes for the rest of the concept art by Dev Madden. Madden served as an art director as well as character designer for all three games. Before Sly, he worked on numerous comic books for DC. The Sly series was heavily inspired by comics, but also the era of Saturday morning cartoons, shows like Batman the Animated Series. Just like those cartoons, the Sly series adopted the title cards for each of its chapters. These can really set the mood for the world you're about to explore. Here's the character sheet for all the main characters in the game. My favorite villain boss design here is Raleigh. The unfortunate part is that his boss fight is kinda weak. For a character who is the main brains of the Fiendish Five, he uses his brawn over his intelligence during the fight. It would have been cool to see him use more of his machinery. Something tells me his boss fight wasn't always planned to be that way with this concept art here. The developers have gone on record saying that the Raleigh stages were meant to be underwater. There's even footage of the cut levels for his chapter. Panda King's world was supposed to be the first chapter you visit, but it got moved, which leads me to believe that Raleigh got a lot of his levels scrapped in favor of an easier beginning chapter. The other bosses in the game are extremely well designed and memorable. Clockwerk is my favorite final boss of all time, and I played God of War 3. Mugshot is my third favorite as he looks absolutely fantastic as a mafia boss. Their major inspiration was from The Godfather, a movie that made the Don look more like a bulldog using a prosthetic jaw. I'm sure the Sly team decided to just make Mugshot a bulldog as a nod to Don Corleone. It's a shame what they did to his character in Sly 3 though.
Your mother was a broken down tub of junk with more gentleman callers than the operator.
Nobody talks that way about my mother. Nobody!
Looking at the rest of this sheet, you'll probably notice two characters who weren't in the game. Zig and Zag were both planned to be in the game. In fact, they have fully finished models. Well, actually just one model. Zag was the only one I found in this jam-packed Winter 2002 demo. This demo has a lot of unused assets that didn't make the cut. Noticeably, Zag. Instead of the hologram checkpoints, Zag pops out a chest and takes your picture. If you look closer, they added a top covering their upper half, indicating they are probably female. This can also be backed up by the little giggle she makes if you hit the treasure chest. There were a couple sources saying they were meant to be paparazzi in the game. Seeing as just one of them takes your picture, I don't know how true that is. I didn't see Zig anywhere in the demo and every checkpoint was just Zag. One can only speculate if that's the whole story or if they were part of the Sly gang but changed roles later on. One thing's for certain, their newspaper still made it into the game. Going back to Clockwerk for a sec, as I was writing the script I noticed something worth discussing. One of the first episodes of Batman Taz I saw was Heart of Ice. It was the episode that introduced Mr. Freeze, my favorite Batman villain of all time, but someone at Sucker Punch seemed to like him as well. The last chapter in Sly 1 is called Cold Heart of Hate. It's clear that this is a direct reference to that episode. I'll go a little further and speculate that it isn't the only thing they took from that episode. In it, Mr. Freeze is seen in shadow for a good bit with his eyes being the main focus. When we get a clear view, his eyes and eyebrows are the key features of his face. Another noticeable character feature of Victor Von Freeze is his voice.
That's Mr. Freeze to you.
Now if we look at Clockwerk, we can see the same things. His prominent features other than his wings are his eyes and eyebrows. Instead of a red glow, they are primarily yellow but do flash red when spoken. He mostly stays in shadow all throughout the game to instill fear. And lastly, his voice has a chilling metally sound to it.
Sly Cooper, you have escaped my gas chamber and destroyed my death ray. Remarkable. You Coopers always find a way to beat me.
As I mentioned before, the art director for Sly had worked for DC Comics in the past. Batman Adventures was among the books he had worked on. And what do you know? It's the comic version of Batman the Animated Series. I think it's safe to say that his DC days majorly influenced the making of Sly Cooper. Madden still works on video games, with his latest work being on Crash Team Rumble and Return to Monkey Island. He did a comic for the mentioned Crash game. Looking at his other works on his website, you can see the Sly art style in all of his works. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's really neat to see characters like Batman be drawn in another franchise's style. Sly Cooper was unique in the way that it looks different from anything back then and even now. With the franchise so charming and filled with character, it's a shame it was never really popular worldwide. With the re-release of Sly 1 on PS5, maybe that will change. I am an indie game dev myself, so I've had my fair share of story rewrites and character reworks. The sad part about it is that I haven't even released my own game yet, as I'm still not 100% happy with it. When making this video, it was nice to see the passion behind the first Sly game. If anything, it was an inspiration to see all of its original flaws that helped make it the best it could be. As of recently, I've been watching other games' history, and they are all about the same, and the way that they were completely different games than the finished result. Maybe one day I'll make a video talking about my journey so far and share what that project even looks like. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't say this in my vids, but it would definitely help if you hit the subscribe button and leave a like. With that being said, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.